Hi everybody, sorry about this crazy screen. Let me get to our presentation today. So we are super excited to present our proposal for conducting business in Mexico. The ideas that we have for product launching, we are also super excited about, and they will be included at the end of this presentation. So I want to give our production team the credit that they deserve. So Krista Blair, Karen Riddle, James Clark, Ammon Lewis, Jennifer Vasquez, and myself, we have all done extensive research on the business opportunity in Mexico. And we are excited to share with you what we found. We've looked at everything from culture to economy in Mexico. And we will start our presentation by first looking into the Mexican culture and how that affects business. As we begin to examine the possibility of beginning business in Mexico, it is important to understand, obviously, the Mexican culture. So the Hofstede dimensions are a great way to look into where the United States and Mexico differs in their cultural understandings. So as you can see, there are some differences here. Power distance, individualism are pretty different. Indulgence. The one here that we are most concerned about would be individualism. And that's because Mexico is much more concerned with the group than the individual. And believe it or not, the United States is known for being more concerned about individual, what's in it for them, not super worried about everyone else around them, whereas Mexico is pretty much the opposite, as you can see from the chart here. Blue is Mexico and purple is the United States. So you can see the difference that we have there. So if you were doing business in Mexico, it would be necessary to understand the group mentality, where the individual performance is less important than their group dynamic. Now going into communication and scheduling culture. So this has a lot to do with individualism. Also, family is the most important thing in Mexico. They will not work on weekends because of family time. Most of the time, obviously, there's some careers that you have to work on weekends, but also holidays are a strict no working day, so that it can be spent with family. And this makes them pretty flexible in time management. They're not afraid to put off a task for family time or for time in general, really. They don't like confrontation. So the culture as a whole tries to avoid arguments and disagreements. This applies to the working place, obviously. When giving constructive criticism, it is very important to be polite and sugarcoat things. If you want to be effective, be direct in a very indirect way, is our advice. The Mexican culture is a very sensitive culture. They can be very helpful and very friendly once you gain their trust, but in order to gain their trust, we would suggest caring about their family and speaking politely. If you offend them, it could make doing business very hard. Maybe it wouldn't even work at all. So these are things to keep in mind. Another culture thing to keep in mind when doing business, and especially for this slide, when negotiating, is to always keep your end game in mind. So although you may not be negotiating how you would negotiate with a citizen of the United States, you're going to have to go about it a different way. So it's very important to share your information, rank and order your priorities, and make sure that you know your accounting, like the numbers behind. Don't offer something too low or too high. Be realistic and be able to offer something that makes sense, and do it in a very polite and non-aggressive way. If you keep in mind their culture, what they value most, which is family, if you can tie that in and be kind, never be offensive, this will be your best bet to successful negotiating. It's important to grab an opportunity rather than to chase a goal. Now we want to switch over to the government and economic side of things. So government and politics. Mexico is a federal republic, and just recently President Obrador was elected as president. And this has really revitalized the country. His platform concentrates on reforming policy to tackle corruption, crime, and poverty. He has also promised entrepreneurial freedom to be respected, and that financial and fiscal discipline will be maintained. However, a recent tariff standoff with the United States is causing unrest in the business sectors. So although the government has really shown a lot of promise and potential, this tariff issues are definitely a concern and always need to be on the forefront of our minds, and we always need to stay updated on that movement. However, we are very hopeful because of our strong relationship that regulation can be made between our two countries. So now let's look at the business environment. It is very interesting, if you are ever doing this research on your own, to go to doingbusiness.org and look at these rankings. So out of 190 countries, Mexico is ranked 54, which although it's not like top 10 amazing, it still is pretty good. Sorry about that. It still is pretty good. So there are some real perks to doing business in Mexico. We'll start with contract processing. Mexico ranks 43rd. This really shows how effective Mexico is at enforcing contracts. It can take up to 350 days, which may sound like a long time, but when compared to other countries, it can take up to 4 times that long. And so it is really an awesome thing that Mexico has going for them. Now, the ease of starting business is ranked just below half. This makes us confident that although it won't be unrealistically easy, it really shouldn't be too hard either. Taxes, though, are a drawback. They can end up being around 35%, and even higher maybe for non-residents, which is quite a lot. So we recommend caution in just one more area, and that is registering property. And that is important to keep in mind when planning location and construction. Overall, we don't believe there are any huge hurdles here of doing business in Mexico. So Mexico is part of the World Trade Organization and also NAFTA. NAFTA is the North American Free Trade Agreement with the United States and Canada. So this is awesome for us. Like we said, there has been a little standoff in tariffs between the United States and Mexico, but we do believe that it can be regulated and that it won't affect us too badly. So let's see here. I just do want to note here before we move on that the US and Mexico have a significant trading relationship. So this is super cool. It shows that 47% of imports to Mexico are supplied by the United States, and 80% of exports from Mexico go to the United States. So this shows how dependent we really are on each other. And we're going to talk about it a little bit more in this next slide. So it shows here that Mexico has 12 free trade agreements with over 46 different countries. Mexico has more FTAs than most all other countries. So in the past few decades, Mexico has gone from a very closed economy to a very, very open economy. And this can be good and bad. But it is good because it makes doing business easier for us over there. Like we said, there's no tariffs other than the little standoff, but we've already talked about that. So an FDI, foreign direct investment, is defined as an investment made by a firm or individual in one country into business interests located in another country. So there are 2 common types of FDIs, horizontal and vertical. This is important to keep in mind when determining your business in Mexico. Horizontal would mean to be running the exact same business that you're already running in the United States, but doing it in Mexico. Vertical is running a similar business in Mexico that you're already running in the United States, or one that enhances, or they're connected in some way, but not directly. So our caution here is that because Mexico is so open, that it's easy for a lot of people to do business there, a lot of different countries. So it can eventually create strong competition. Current economic conditions here. As you can see, we've attached 4 charts. There's the GNI per capita, inflation, consumer prices, annual percentage, lending interest rates, and the GDP. So it's important to look at all of these and not just one, because if you look at the GNI per capita, it shows that there has been an upward climb from 2013 to 2017. So this shows that those years, the income in the country has really gone up, which is awesome. But then when you look at the GDP growth annual percentage, the rate of growth is not consistent, which may mean that your product may do really well one year, but then the next, it won't do so hot. And then if you look at the inflation consumer prices annual percentage, it shows that the inflation rate has increased significantly in the past couple of years. This would also make it seem that it's not the most stable market. So after analyzing the current economic conditions, it would be wise to use some caution before entering the market in Mexico. And we're all familiar with currency in Mexico, at least the name of it at least, the Mexican peso. When compared to the US dollar, it appears that it's weakening. However, that's not necessarily the case. Over the last 5 years, just because of the political unrest, increased violence, and uncertainty about their future, the value of the peso has, in fact, fallen. However, in 2018, it was actually the best performing major currency against the dollar. And we are giving that credit to the election of President Obrador. He really has revitalized the country. And in that, an effect of that has been strengthening the peso. So if a serious peso gain in the peso occurs, it could mean a substantial loss of revenue if not properly addressed. So we just make sure that we are understanding where the peso is, where it's going, the predictions, so that we are always, when talking about costs and prices and money and cash flow, that we are always maximizing our options there, so we're never left in a deficit. Okay, so that was our evaluation of the Mexican economy. Now we want to evaluate our 3 products. So the first one is drone crop dusting with organic pesticides. So drones are becoming huge. They're used all the time, everyday use even. For our purpose, we would use it as organic crop dusting, which has been done in the United States. It's not huge in Mexico, so the competition really is non-existent in Mexico. Barrier could be cost. There's no market currently in Mexico, so it could take a minute to convince farmers and other players in the market that it really is a great idea. But the need is huge because the standards have been set by the Mexican Secretariat of Agriculture that they need to start to change into a more organic, by using more organic pesticides in their agriculture to be healthier, safer, and more wanted. So we think that this could be a super awesome product. Now, our next product would be a washing machine. So this isn't your everyday washing machine. As you can see from the picture, not even close. But in developing parts of Mexico, a washing machine is out of the question. It's too expensive, and it's just not in their budget at all. So our idea is to create this much more simple, much more cost-friendly washing machine that can increase the health and cleanliness in suffering parts of Mexico. So the barrier could be that the poorer areas still can't afford it, even though it's way cheaper, that they won't be willing to spend the money on it. because they already have a system that they're using, which is just whatever water source that they have that day. So this is an awesome product to look into. And lastly, a human GPS. So the need here is huge. Mexico is a major port for human trafficking. No matter what kind of police or military forces use to prevent it, there will always be a new way formed for human trafficking, which is terrible. But this has actually already gone into practice by, it's been done in local officials. So they have chips put in their bodies, and we know where they are at all times. The downfall to this is that it costs $2,000 to put it in, and then $2,000 a year after that. So it's very expensive. So that's roughly $170 a month. And the competition is slim, so there really wouldn't be a huge problem there in the competition. The biggest problem would definitely be the finances. These chips are a wonderful idea. It will be a harder sell because of how it will make people feel knowing that they are being tracked. A selling point that we think will be that we can be tracked and watched via smartphone. So I think this will be a huge thing for parents probably. And if you're working a job like police officials and government officials, but you can be watched via Snapchat or Facebook, and you can have update posts so that you know where people are in the general area. Okay, so this concludes our presentation. We hope it was helpful, and we hope that you got something out of it. We are welcoming questions. We're open to feedback. So please let us know what your thoughts were, and thank you for listening.